Welcome to the Digital Marketing Mentor. I'm your host, Danny Gavin, and together with industry leaders and marketing experts, we'll explore the meeting point of mentorship and marketing. We'll discover how these connections have affected careers, marketing strategies, and lives. Now get ready to get human. Hello, I'm Danny Gavin, founder of Optidge, marketing professor, and the host of the Digital Marketing Mentor. Today we're speaking with Dorit Sasson, who is the SEO manager at Optidge. She joined the team this past March. Prior to that, she spent years as an SEO analyst and consultant with a focus on B2B enterprises. Dorit brings a sharp mix of technical expertise and strategic tenacity to the ever-evolving AI-driven search landscape, a topic we explore often on the podcast. Her work has delivered results for clients ranging from B2B SaaS companies to a Fortune 500 telecom company. Today, we're going to talk about how Dorit develops top-ranking SEO strategies in competitive niche markets, as well as why SEO is a long-term game and how to manage expectations around results. How are you doing, Dorit?
Doing great. Absolutely amazing.
So I like to say, most people, they come to Optidge, and it takes them a couple months for me to get them onto the podcast, but you jumped right away. So I'm so excited you're here.
I'm excited as well. It's a real privilege. Thank you for having me.
So what's one thing people would have no clue about you after they first met you?
They would not have known that I have spent years in another country, which happens to be Israel. They would have never have known what my name stands for, which means a little leader. They would have never known that I served as a lieutenant in the IDF. I gave you three things.
Were you born in Israel or did you move there when you were little?
So my father's Israeli. So he spent a lot of years going back and forth between the two countries, meaning New York and Israel. I was an Israeli citizen from birth. I was born in Manhattan, New York City. And from 18, I just dropped out. Once I started college, I knew that after volunteering on a kibbutz that the college life wasn't for me, and the rest is history. And I went and volunteered on a kibbutz, and it became my second home, and then quickly my first.
And how long were you in the military for?
3 years. I was in a special unit that combined agrarian farm work with military service. It was at a very different time in Israel's history, and we just served on different military bases with foreign recruits from different countries. And together we went through the army together and did different things.
That's amazing. Wait, so when you look back to that experience, how does it shape how you lead people today?
You know, everything I learned in life really came from the IDF. It was really about thinking about the other and not thinking about myself in America. It's very much like what I do, look at me, my achievements, look how great I am. And we don't have that kind of elitist sort of mentality. It's more about like even my lieutenants were like big brothers and big sisters. And you have to, in order to survive and thrive in Israel, you behave like you're in a wolf pack. It's not the individual that matters, it's the group. And the strength of the group depends on everyone. So everybody plays a role. And that really served me well because I came from a very different world and a very different culture. And I didn't know how to fit in right away. And I had to learn very much the hard way, how to let go of my ego and how to really connect with other people and not think about myself and what people think about me and look how great I am. It was a real challenge at first because we came from different countries and everybody had that ego, very much like, oh my God, I'm so great. Look how great I am. And, people in Israel really don't care about what you do and how you do it, that in that degree. It wasn't so self-absorbed. So it was a very different mindset.
So coming back to America and working in the US workforce, where I'm not saying everyone's to that extreme, but obviously it's a little bit different. Was it hard for you moving back into a different culture or being in a business culture, which is not exactly like that?
Well, you have to remember, I left the States as a teenager and I came back as a wife and a mother. And the world had completely shifted. I didn't even have any tax records from 20 years. And it came to what is Costco? What is Target? What is an SUV? I had no idea. In Israel at the time, cars were like dog cages. They're not this big, massive. So that geographical size really was jarring. Didn't have an idea. So there was different levels of adjustment. There was that, wow, I'm in a honeymoon phase, but look how big the States is. And in Israel, everybody is one big family. It's like everybody gives you one big hug, and it's not like that here. And so Israel will never be America, and America will never be Israel. And Those are the two real fine lines that I had to accept in order to fit in. It wasn't an immediate, right now I'm here doing this and I'm making money and I'm paying my taxes and I'm buying food. And it was a gradual, slow process of readjusting to a lot of different things at the same time.
But it sounds like you knew what you had to do, even though it might have been hard. I don't know how many years now you've been back in the US, but do you feel more comfortable here?
I don't think I'll ever feel 100% comfortable. I think as an Israeli, I'm never meant to be comfortable in the States. I think I'm Jewish, but I'm also an Israeli. And I feel like I don't think my job here is to be comfortable. And we left for economic reasons. So at some point, that is not the only thing in life, being just making money and comfortable. Yes, for a financial perspective, but not feeling like the life is meaningful. There's something that lacks for me personally.
So let's pivot.
Yes, please.
How did you first discuss? No worries.
I can talk about myself all day, it's just like, I'm sure there's going to be a limit to how much people want to hear my story, but I'm sure it's...
No, your story's awesome, but we have to talk a little bit about SEO. So how did you first discover SEO and what pulled you into making it your career?
I was a teacher by trade. I started my journey as an EFL, English as a Foreign Language teacher. And I also pivoted when I did reverse immigration back to the States. I became an ESL teacher, and I was able to do that pretty seamlessly. And fast forward 2019, 2016, just the world economy's changed and shifted. And I suddenly found myself unemployment line. And I was able to start really pivoting really fast because I was always a writer. And I wrote a book called Accidental Soldier, which is right here. Blurred a little bit, but it was about my service and sacrifice in the Israel Defense Forces, a story that I felt I was born to write here in the States. And then I had to figure out how to market it. And I didn't know how to market it in the way that, was a pretty way to get to most people at the time. And I had a website. So somebody said, hey, use keywords. And then, the next thing you know, I was researching keywords. But that wasn't really like how it flourished into my career. The next thing I knew was that I was also supporting authors and writers who also were trying to build an online marketing platform, or an online author platform, which was the big buzzword at the time. And that, with my kind of unemployment situation, somebody said, if you want to write, you might as well learn SEO. And I'm like, oh, cool. What is SEO? I'd love to know. I only know how to spell it. I don't know what it is. So I just got certified by a really good person in pioneering in the industry, Heather Lloyd Martin, who runs the SEO Copywriting Institute. She's she's one of the pioneers. I got started with her. I was like, cool, this is really cool. What else do I need to know? And it felt like I was on top of the world because I had this toolbox called SEO. I was a writer. I felt like a queen. I was like, yay, I have everything I need. And then I was just supporting writers and using my ESL and my teaching skills to help them understand and explain complex concepts. This is what it is, because they were intimidated. They were like, I don't know anything nerdy and technical. It's too scary for me. And I was like, let's talk about this a little bit. And so I developed a course, especially for authors and writers who were scared by this concept. And I, at the meantime, was learning it. So I decided, there's a saying, if you don't know what you know, you need to teach it, or whatever that saying is. So I just started to develop these online courses and teach writers and marketers. And that's how it started. That's how the journey itself got started. There was other pieces to that journey, but that's the question you asked was, how did I get started?
It's so cool that you got trained by Heather. I've been on her email list for years.
Yes, I have a bunch in my inbox too.
She is amazing. That's so cool.
I'm so nice that we share common people. Like, it's so cool. The SEO world is very small.
But I don't know if everyone knows about her in particular. So I think that's really cool. Is there something about SEO that you believed early on that you no longer believe today?
I had no idea that AI would take over. I was like, wow, keywords. And Heather was just like, it was just like when she even taught these modules, I was like printing them on the machine and I'm like studying them and going on Google and testing them. And I'm like, this is so cool. You mean I can connect to a person just by a keyword? And that's how I found her. I was just like putting in a keyword. I had no idea that there was this machine called AI. I thought that SEO would stay the king and the queen of the castle, and they would hold all the secrets, and all we had to do is keep learning all the secrets. And then when we would be kings and queens, and we would be able to like disseminate information. I did not know that the position of SEO would be so threatened and so volatile and so vulnerable, because it felt at the time that I was learning something that was just, I wasn't a pioneer. I didn't start like Heather Lloyd Martin, who was starting from AOL and the World Wide Web and saw the different stages. I entered very later in that start. I started my career in 2017, which is, a decade, and so much has happened. But at the time I was just like, there's just so much that I can learn within this little castle, and I didn't realize that there would be other castles and other cities being built around our little castle. And suddenly it didn't feel like we were special anymore. And I thought that SEO would always be special. And I felt like now we're always like, we get a seat at the table, but it's with other people, other things.
Yeah, it's definitely not like what it used to be. But I think just like that there were pioneers back in the day when there were like 5, 10 search engines and no one knew how do I rank and what do I do?
Yeah.
I feel like I feel like we're in the same time and moment today, and we have the opportunity to make that next castle, make that next special thing. But it's hard, right? Because if you grew up in one castle to go build another, it could be, it's tough.
This is my castle. I think, why do I have to deal with your castle? Don't put your castle in my castle. I want to stay in my castle.
Yeah, understandable. Yeah. Let's get into B2B and niche marketing. So what makes B2B or niche market SEO fundamentally different from broader consumer SEO?
I didn't know this until I entered as enterprise SEO, which is another castle, a whole another castle. And I frankly didn't have any experience dealing with stakeholders and BPs. And this was like taking me into one little diving board and throwing me into the huge deep end. And that's where I connected with the idea that in order to really rank, you need to first get buy-in from stakeholders. You need to learn the buying journey. You need to understand how complex getting that buy-in and then getting people to understand what it is that you do. And that's what makes B2B very different than, let's say, consumer, because it's more appealing. You've got a fast turnaround, a fast cycle. There's a faster sales cycle. And everything has to be very emotionally driven to the point that it appeals to something. Like I'm thinking just consumer at this point. For B2B, there's a lot of the buying journey is very, very different. And in order for the business to understand the other person's business, there's got to be a state where they're learning about it, what you're doing. They're in the awareness type funnel, then they're learning about it from a decision perspective. And there's a lot that happens behind the scenes in that decision. The content also reflects that.
Naturally, when it comes to B2B, and not always, but there's often a lot of competitors who may have a lot of money and a long history. So when you're coming into that space new, where do you start?
I have to be very humble and vulnerable here and say, and I'm just talking, and it was 4 years ago, like maybe a little bit more, but I remember it so strongly because it was such a deep pivot for me, because I was so used to working with like a group of people. And suddenly I'm in like a Fortune 500 telecom industry that is just a tough nut to crack. And you have to be, I come from New York City, so I'm very much like into competition. And so I had to translate my vigor, my vim, my desire to solve problems, my hunger for challenges in the online space and figure out what the heck is going on. I think the best thing that I did at the time was that I was just studying the competition and figuring out who's who and what's what and what it is that they're doing. And I think I'm also very much an advocate to any client that I serve. So I was just like, damn, I want this money on the table for this client. How do I keep the money for this client on the table? And suddenly I became that voice. And the voice told me I need to study what they're doing. I need to make sure that what they're doing is different than what you're doing. I can understand the difference. Let me find the opportunity within that. And that's where my head constantly kept me going. I was like, where's the opportunity? What is it that they're doing? What is it that this business is doing? How can I set this business apart? And that was the setup. That was the tone from day one.
So instead of copying, it's more about finding that area that maybe no one has taken yet and go after that.
Absolutely.
Would you say that's the case?
Yes. And I can give you countless examples of what I did if you would like me to jump into that next question, because I can.
Yeah, I love that because my next question is like walking us through a campaign or a strategy where you had to get creative because the obvious SEO plays, or maybe, those obvious things that competitors were doing were already taken.
You have to remember, I was dealing with a Fortune 500 company, or 50. I don't even remember if it was one less zero, one more zero. I never get the two. I never know. Each vertical, like let's say there was wireless, and that was consumer. Okay. But then there's B2B. So we're thinking IoT, we're thinking cloud, we're thinking internet. Each one of those was a client within and a stakeholder. And it was just like, what do I do to get ranked? Tell me, what do I need to do? And I had to figure out really quickly, because everything would be like, okay, well, write content, let's write a white paper or thought leadership piece, and it's not getting ranked. Well, why is it not getting ranked? And I had to constantly, or if it was a page, a sales page or a product page or a service page, it didn't look good on me if that page after a few months was just flat in terms of rankings. So I had to study. What I constantly did was that I asked myself the same three questions each time. What is this page ranking for? What should it be ranking for? And how do we get there? And those three questions kept driving me home. And even if I found myself in very difficult difficult keyword situations where I would literally bang my head against the wall. And then I would go to my colleague / supervisor and I was like, I can't find anything here. What the heck is going on? I had to get creative. I had to pause, pivot. I had to look at it in a different way. I had to ask myself a little bit of different questions. And then ultimately I would it depended on the situation. If we're dealing with like a service page, then I had to do like a quantitative analysis and see where the gaps are in content, because, you're playing with big boys, big people. You're not playing with little fish. You're dealing with like big fish, with people with big pockets, lots of money. And that was just the way that I had to keep riding those waves and constantly like doing a quantitative analysis and seeing, what is it with these top page ranking elements? Is there something that I'm doing that they're doing that we need to do more of? Whether it was expanding the word count, whether it was getting creative with the content expansion types, whether it was adding an FAQ page, and everything needed a buy-in. Like it was very much like, here's what we're proposing, here's what we're thinking, here's what we see, and then it would go through, and we would see results. That was if we were dealing with a service page. If we were doing with content, it was also difficult keywords. The competition was very tough. And so I would constantly study and see where the gaps and the opportunities were.
Dealing with that bureaucracy, kind of having to get everything approved, was that difficult, or did you just learn how to, I don't want to say manipulate the system, but work the system?
It was very frustrating. I love it when I can have a direct impact. I had always a direct impact. I had a line to anything that I needed, I got, to connect to on an email level, on a phone call level. But to get it actually implemented on the website, you have to go through legal, you have to go through approvals, multiple buy-ins. They always loved like the emails and they say, this is great information. No, and like, so tachlis, like, are you going to go and put this in? Are you going to bottom line, are you going to implement this? Or are you going to just say it's so nice and so great? We love this. And I did so much work and it really showed, but nothing really got implemented. And that was and in the meantime, they're ranking, they're taking over. Why are we not doing anything? And it was frustrating because it was on one hand, you were riding the train and you were pushing it and you were moving it, but you couldn't do very much more than that. And the train kept moving and all the other trains were passing by and we were like slowing down and not moving. I'm like, this can't be happening.
So you mentioned a big part of the strategy is finding opportunities in content. So like practically, how does one go about spotting keywords, topics, or content opportunities that others are missing?
There's a lot of different ways I did it that were faster than other ways. The faster way is, looking at what the topics that we were missing on a whole. And we were missing a lot of different topics. So, wireless in itself or IoT, like very basic questions, like what is IoT, Internet of Things, like glossary content. When you're dealing with a very big corporation, sometimes the buyer doesn't even know what the heck this is. And I would make cases and I'd say, we need to have education. You can't just expect people to know what the heck this is. And sometimes the language was so over the top, like the jargon was even hard. And I think that's just a learning gap, things that, there's a missed opportunity even in that itself. So I would often come with that to a table and say, we need more glossary content. And it would be like as simple as writing something up like that and educating the masses on the very simple level of what this is. And so that keyword would drive that type of content. And we'd have many different pieces like that. Or it would be like this versus this, like this application or this technology versus this technology. Because then you're comparing and you're contrasting and then they understand, okay, what's the difference? Maybe I need this or maybe I don't need that. So those were like the first level type of content. And then I would go into our tool called SEMrush, which is still used to today. And a lot of businesses use it. And I would just run the URL. It's a very basic, Heather Lloyd Barton type tactic. Just run the URL, see what it's ranking for and see, what our page is ranking for and see what that page is ranking for. And many times it was just as simple as that first step and trying to get the same type of keyword. You're literally beating each other out on the same keyword or variation, but it was more like, let me find what we're ranking for and let's us re-optimize the content. That was always the cheaper strategy. That was always the better one of the two. When it came to building new content, that was a bigger hurdle, but I ended up getting many pieces ranked on this on this dying B2B bit blog that I was fortunate to resuscitate. And as a result of many, many attempts and tries and briefs, I think hundreds and hundreds of briefs I wrote just to help build that kind of content awareness around what is or versus. And those were very common type keywords that either the site was ranking for or we strive to rank for it.
So this sort of basic glossary content or I guess even comparative content, do you feel like there's still place for that today?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The reason why I'm very emphatic about it is because it's not just what the keyword stands for, it's how the top rankers are actually educating their target audience around this. And there's a section in our brief that we would always say, okay, so what is the competition doing that we could be doing? What are some of the insights that are being done with others? And it was they were always the top rankers that were outranking us were using YouTube videos, infographics, right? And they were building content in such an engaging way that it was just pure joy to make a recommendation like that, because I was damn, that's such a great thing. Let's do more of this. And that became a reality. And there was a lot of the people that I was working with strongly advocated for those recommendations. Because that's what Google favors. They love that kind of YouTube engine, right? And it's a great way to get sometimes you don't even have to read the content. You just go into a 1-minute video and you get everything that you need. And we didn't do enough of that. So it's really not about only the keyword. It's really about how are you helping that keyword to get ranked with the brief. And the brief was really the foundational blueprint for everything. That I think I attributed to that brief many, many times over.
And I know briefs is like the art of the brief is something that you're using today. And I imagine or even know that is also going to be the key to how one can get ranked within LLM, Google AI mode. Would you agree?
It's it's an art and a science. Sometimes it's an art and sometimes it's a science. Being able to know how to build it, what to look for. When I said that SEO was like the castle, it was all about the keyword and how top rankers are using top ranking elements because this is what they're doing. And now AI and overviews are becoming evolved from search generative experience. And then search generative was the new buzzword. And now it's AI overviews, right? And carousels and images and things like that. And how do we get ranked for that? That kind of language is taking over sections of our brief. And how do we include that in the way that we're making recommendations? So it's definitely evolved. And if I look at, so I would train cross collaboratively. So I would take a group of people from consumer who weren't involved in business, and they were also doing briefs, but we would never have a unified brief. And I would teach them, and that would be like a training for them. If I look back at that training, if I had to do that kind of training today, it would be very, very different. All of a sudden, it wouldn't be about the keyword. It would be about AI and overviews. And it's just mind-boggling because that wasn't that long ago.
So outside of your brief structure and SEMrush, is there any other tool or technique that you swear by? And I'm not talking about necessarily from before, but nowadays.
That I swear by. Whoa, that's a big commitment. I spend a lot of time looking at Google itself and looking how the language is being used in different ways. It's intentional because Google is favoring certain types of content over others. Google is favoring certain types of page types over others. Why is it so authoritative? And where are the non-authoritative sites, and why is it for this keyword only or this topic? And people also ask questions and things like that. So I don't know if swearing is, and I'm not a betting person and I'm not a gambling person, so it's really hard for me to go that way because everything changes all the time. But I spend a lot of time analyzing the SERPs, and just because I'm a word person and a writer, and I'm an observer, I spend a lot of time looking and seeing and paying attention and starting my observations and insights that way. And then I do a little bit more digging and a little bit more digging. I spend some time with some of our AI. I do use Phrase, which is an SEO briefing tool, which has helped, but it's variants. It's very different. I use AI tools like AI Perplexity, ChatGPT, but ultimately, I really do believe that we aren't being taken over yet by AI, and there is something called human intervention. And there is something called humanity, and there's something called connection. And I do believe that we still have the ability to make decisions because I've seen mistakes with AI, and I'm sure you have as well. And I know that you have a podcast on this, so I've listened to that as well. It's real. It's a thing. And so I spend the time perfecting the art and the science of a brief by being a human being and just looking and making decisions based on where I am in real time, and not relying only on AI to do everything for me and copycat it, because then I feel it's unethical for me, because then I might as well just have AI do everything. And it doesn't always do it the right way.
So we spoke a little bit about getting rankings, but how would you keep rankings once you've earned them, especially when competitors are watching everything you do?
Well, I gave an example where things don't move very fast. Let's say ideally you've gotten the buy-in, you've gotten the brief approved, you've gotten the content implemented, and then you're constantly looking at the rankings. And I do spend a fair amount of time monitoring, updating the performance trackers, the metrics, reanalyzing why content dropped in certain rankings. And I think that's just what I keep doing is testing, retesting, monitoring, remonitoring, and that rinse, wash, repeat.
In a world of instant gratification, and when there's so many other digital marketing strategies, how do you convince stakeholders that SEO is worth the wait?
It's a tough question because SEO is really not a sprint. It's a marathon. You're training. You're constantly training. Worst case scenarios, there was just like, how do I get on the first page of Google? How do I make sure that this stays? It's a very hard conversation to have because you're not in control of those rankings and you can't commit to something like that. And it's very hard for those kind of stakeholders because they want to understand the why before they even get the results. And so it's really important to manage expectations that way. But then also there's another level of just strategizing and planning and showing them like, this is where we are right now. Just like the stock market, SEO compounds. It's compounding SEO interests and that compounding develops over time. So what you do today will continue to compound. And so that little bit of that kind of settles in. And then having that insight with like, let's say a 30 or 60-day plan, like here's where we are today. This is what I'm seeing. We believe that we will get X. And this is what I would do. I would say we would believe that, and we had a tool that did this. We believe that we have over time, we will get X number of clicks if we do X and Y and Z. And this is where we think we will land. And it was like a cost of opportunity. And that was a very strong blueprint or a way to convince stakeholders that we have a strategy. And when we tied it into a business decision, it was it was an easier play than just saying, let's do SEO. I have to say, though, that environment was very different, let's say agency, where they're paying for a service line and they don't see the results right away. So it's very different environment. Like the clients that Optidge serves is not the same like what I would do in that environment of B2B. If a keyword lost its ranking, it wasn't like people noticed right away. I noticed because I cared. And so I would constantly revisit and relook. But it's very different when you're paying your own money for a service line and you want to make sure that stays. So my job is to continually look at that. To your other question is to continually monitor, knowing that sometimes that happens. And what is it that's causing that to happen, which is the other question that you asked.
So in the agency world that you're in right now, how do you keep clients encouraged during the quiet months when results aren't visible yet, or maybe, let's say, the months that aren't performing as well?
Yeah, I've done this a few times already in some of the client calls where we show our monthly reports. And what I've done already is I've already gathered insights on early promise of ranking. What is the content already doing? How is it performing? Oh, we're ranking for this search term in the carousel. And that's a great thing because now people are looking at this carousel and they're clicking on this blog post and it's not a sponsored ad, and that's good because it's quote unquote free traffic. It's one way to keep them occupied or engaged. Another way is just to keep them informed of what you're doing in terms of content, like where your next steps are. So if there's like a certain campaign that you're planning or what you're looking at, and I just keep them busy that way and say, here's where my strategy is. Here's what I'm planning on doing for the next month's worth of content. I'm always looking at rankings and revisiting them and looking at them in different ways.
So with the proliferation of AI and with the SERPs changing and maybe even the SERPs going away completely and only having like an AI mode or ChatGPT sort of interface, what do you think marketers can do now to prepare and to get ready and to educate themselves?
I'm in the business of SEO. So in my world, I'm thinking as long as you have a website, you have SEO. I mean, I know that it sounds really weird that AI and SEO, one is this, one is that. We work different sides of the street. I feel like AI gets siloed or SEO gets siloed or they both get siloed. I think we owe it to ourselves and the agencies or the organizations that we're working for and the people that we're together with is just help each other embrace that this is our new world. How do we support both of them to help each other? Because I sometimes feel like they're not on speaking terms. they're not on speaking terms. I was like that with Excel when I had Excel issues. I was like, I'm not on speaking terms with you, Excel. I'm getting too efficient for you, and you do not like it when I'm efficient. So goodbye. I feel the same way in that, like, that's the same kind of feeling I get with the AI and the SEO piece. And when I left that B2B world, AI was just being used as a content platform, a content development platform. So it was more like, how do we create briefs with AI? It wasn't like AI on the website and now everything about our brief sucks. And I think we need to also embrace the idea that we even with AI, and I know this is going to sound a little weird, that we still have something called SEO best practices. And they still have a place at the table, and we should not be throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And I think in this new world, it's AI this and your next shiny object syndrome. And then we forget these best practices because we're so consumed with the AI. And so we have to find this gentle balance. And how do we do that? And I think that's the world that we're living in right now. That's the way that the world is heading. And I feel like it's very easy to forget all of our SEO tools. Everything that I was trained in suddenly doesn't matter anymore. And Heather Lloyd Martin had the answer to your question. And she was in an email kind of, and she said, AI this and AI that. At the end of the day, you use SEO best practices. And I'm like, thank you. Like, we still need that at the table. And so we need to figure out, how do we incorporate this new world in our briefs? And we don't like, oh my God, it's AI. I don't want to deal with AI. We work together. How can we support each other, but not lose the SEO that we've earned, that we treasure, that we value, that we see as important? And how do we find that strategy within? It's a very tight rope. It really is. But it's very easy to get blinded by AI and just forget everything. And we can drive ourselves crazy doing that. And I've been there, and it's not a fun place to be. To answer your question, I think marketers just need to keep having these conversations and not like being threatened by them, but just having very open conversations about what it is that we're doing. How do we keep evolving and still maintaining SEO best practices? So long as we have websites, we will continue to get ranked.
Yeah, and a good example, just to end this conversation, and I think I mentioned this to you earlier this week, but our own company website, Optidge, we decided to start creating landing pages that better look at the service that we provide and the industry that we can help. And it more specifically, a page that focused on that we provide HubSpot specifically for medical device companies. So from an SEO perspective, like, that makes sense to create a page about that, make sure it's structured in the right way, covers the topics that are necessary. And so we were doing it from an SEO perspective, but before we knew it, when someone is actually, going on ChatGPT and searching for a company that does HubSpot specifically for medical device companies, we're actually number one. And if we go to traditional Google, we're actually not number one. We're all at the bottom of the page. But approaching it from a more typical traditional SEO background and following those rules actually helps us in the new sort of AI search world, and even in some ways even better than before. But the only caveat is things are changing. So we don't know, once again, just like Google, the way that its algorithm was back in the day, in the early 2000s, the mid 2010s, and now 2020s is very different. I imagine that will be the same case for AI as it's growing up. But I believe, just like you, that building up a website, building content, building who you are, to suddenly take all those SEO foundational points and just throw them out the window is ridiculous. I believe that having that process, that knowledge, that's going to propel you into the AI as well. Yes, we'll have to tweak it maybe a little bit differently here and there, but someone who's just saying, forget about all that, I think they're not going to be successful moving forward. So before we finish our conversation today, I like to just talk about something more personal. I know you're really big into exercise, health, and food. Could you share a little bit with the audience about those things and what you like about exercise?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think I mentioned on a few of my times, I am on a mission to get my body back after being a mom and going through that pregnancy stage. And I just feel like, where's my muscle? So I'm just spending a lot of time kickboxing, doing group fight exercise classes at 6 o'clock in the morning, like I did this morning, just like starting to realize how much energy I do have, how much muscle I do have, and how much it takes work to get there again. And that's a great way to start the day. It gives me so much energy, gives me so much purpose. It's energizing. I enjoy it. So I spend a lot of time in those kind of classes. So I scream and, hit the air and do all sorts of crazy things and lunges at like 5:36, which is a little weird. And then I just run around, and we have lots of trails and parks here in Pittsburgh. So I spend some time in the outdoors before the weather starts to get cold. That's it. I'm just on a big mission, a small, humble mission to get my little body back.
No, that's really important and lovely. Obviously, you got to put the time into it and be very purposeful. And it's awesome that you're making this space for that.
Thank you. Appreciate
So,
it.
Dorit, where can listeners learn more about you?
They can go on LinkedIn and spend some time on LinkedIn and learn more about Optidge and learn about what Danny does and all the things that he does too, because we're all part of that ecosystem together. And they can find me more about LinkedIn and what it is that I enjoy doing and what I'm learning about and where I am in the SEO world, IAI world.
And we'll definitely include a link to your book, which I think is very special.
That.
And yeah, for sure. All right, Dorit, this was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for bringing your really special perspective. You've been through so much throughout your life, and that really shapes you as being a very unique individual in how you approach SEO, life, marketing. So we really, really appreciate that.
Appreciate you.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning into the Digital Marketing Mentor. We will speak with you next time. Thank you for listening to the Digital Marketing Mentor podcast. Be sure to check us out online at thedmmentor.com and at the DM Mentor on Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts for more marketing mentor magic. See you next time.